Walmart, a store most of us know well. The bright lights, the endless aisles, and the familiar hum of late-night shoppers create a sense of normalcy. But what happens when that normalcy is shattered? When a simple trip for everyday essentials becomes a chilling memory you'll never forget. Tonight, we'll share 3 real stories from Walmart that will leave you questioning what's lurking in the shadows. Have you ever experienced something unsettling at Walmart? Maybe a strange encounter or a moment that didn't feel quite right. Share your story in the comments below. And trust me, you'll want to stay until the end, because the third story is one you won't forget. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications if you enjoy hearing true, spine-chilling tales like these. Now, let's begin. Walmart, a place where the bright lights and familiar buzz of activity make everything feel routine. That's how the evening started. Normal, uneventful. A quick stop to grab a phone charger and maybe browse the electronics aisle. It was past 9 p.m., and while the store wasn't empty, it was quiet enough to feel peaceful. The self-checkout was quick, and they were ready to leave. But just as they stepped outside, they saw him. A man in his late 40s or 50s stood near the entrance, leaning on crutches, his cart nearly empty. His long, unkempt hair and worn blue jacket gave him a harmless appearance. He waved them over, his voice soft and strained as he asked for help loading his groceries into his car. It seemed innocent enough. After all, he was on crutches and clearly struggling. Without a second thought, they agreed. They took control of the cart and followed him. At first, everything seemed fine, but instead of heading toward the main parking lot, the man turned down the side of the building. The further they walked, the quieter it became. The hum of the store faded, replaced by the sound of their footsteps on the pavement. The bright lights of the entrance disappeared behind them, replaced by deep shadows. As they walked, unease began to creep in. Why would someone with an injured leg park so far away? They glanced around. The area was deserted, just the two of them in an alleyway leading to the back of the store. The man said little, his pace slow and deliberate. And then they saw it. A lone SUV parked near the loading dock, far from any designated space. It sat in the shadows, almost hidden. The man stopped by the SUV and turned to them. His voice, once soft and strained, now cold and commanding. "Get in." They froze, the weight of his words sinking in. Before they could respond, the back door of the SUV swung open. Another man stepped out, his face partially obscured, his grin unmistakable. Then, without warning, the man with the crutches stood upright, dropping them to the ground. He wasn't injured at all. It had been a setup. Fear took over. They turned and ran, their footsteps echoing through the dark alley. Behind them, the men shouted, their heavy steps closing the distance. Up ahead, a chain-link fence loomed, the only way out. Desperation fueled them as they grabbed the fence and began to climb. Their hands scraped against the metal, their breath ragged, but they didn't stop. Behind them, the footsteps grew louder, closer. With one final push, they made it over, landing hard on the other side. They didn't look back. Running toward the main road, they pulled out their phone, their hands shaking as they called the police. When officers arrived, they searched the area, but the SUV and the men were gone, disappearing into the night. To this day, they don't know who those men were or what they wanted. But one thing is certain, their decision to run saved their life. A moment of kindness turned into a brush with danger, a reminder that not everything is as it seems. What would you have done in this situation? Let us know in the comments below. She was a 20-year-old college student, juggling classes and a part-time job at a store called Market Point. Most nights were uneventful, ringing up groceries, smiling at customers, and counting down the hours until her shift ended. This night seemed no different. The store was quiet, the steady rhythm of beeps from the scanner filling the air. Then he walked in. He was older, in his late 30s or early 40s, and there was something about him that felt wrong. He stepped into her checkout line, his intense gaze fixed on her. As she scanned his items, he leaned in and spoke in a low voice. "I've been watching you," he said. She froze for a moment, unsure how to respond. He smiled, but it wasn't comforting. It felt invasive. He went on, casually mentioning how he noticed her every time he shopped. Then, as if it was the most normal thing in the world, he asked her out. She politely declined, forcing a smile to mask her discomfort. But he didn't take the hint. "You'd have a good time with me," he said, his grin widening. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he walked away, disappearing into the aisles. But even after he was gone, the unease lingered. A few nights later, he returned. The moment she saw him, her stomach dropped. He didn't waste any time, heading straight for her lane. This time, he wasn't even trying to hide his intentions. "Still haven't changed your mind?" he asked, placing his items on the counter. She firmly said no again, her voice steadier this time. His response was a grin, cold, unsettling. When he finally left, she thought it was over. She was wrong. Her shift ended at 10 p.m. The store was nearly empty as she clocked out and walked to her car. The parking lot was dimly lit, and the quiet felt heavier than usual. As she approached her car, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. She glanced around, but saw nothing, telling herself it was just her imagination. She got in and drove home. Her apartment complex was small and quiet, just 15 minutes away. She parked, went inside, and locked the door. But barely 10 minutes later, there was a knock. At first, she thought it might be a neighbor, but as she approached the door, the uneasy feeling returned. She looked through the peephole, and her heart sank. It was him? He stood there, knocking again, harder this time. "I know you're home," he said, his voice muffled through the door. Her breath caught in her throat as he tried the handle, rattling it. He wasn't just persistent anymore. He was trying to get in. She grabbed her phone and dialed 911, whispering to the operator as tears streamed down her face. "There's a man at my door. He's been following me. Please send someone quickly." The knocking didn't stop. Minutes felt like hours until the sound of sirens finally broke through the tension. When the police arrived, they found him still outside her door. He tried to explain it away, claiming he had the wrong apartment, but she knew the truth. He had followed her home. He was banned from the store and the apartment complex that night. She never saw him again, but the memory of his face through the peephole stayed with her. It's a chilling reminder that sometimes, even in familiar places, danger can follow you home. Always trust your instincts. Have you ever had a persistent encounter like this? Share your story in the comments below. It was an ordinary evening, and they just needed a few essentials. A quick stop at a small convenience store in their quiet town. It was around 7:30 p.m., dark enough to feel the calm of the night settling in, but early enough that it didn't feel unsettling. Inside, the store was alive with the soft hum of shoppers moving through the aisles. It felt safe. They picked up toothpaste, milk, and yogurt, crossing items off their mental list. But as they moved through the aisles, they started to notice something: a woman. She was shorter than them, with long blonde hair and a black sweater. At first, She seemed like just another shopper, browsing the shelves like everyone else. But no matter where they went, she was always there, just far enough to stay in their peripheral vision. They moved to the health product section, grabbing soap they'd forgotten earlier. When they stopped briefly to browse some socks, they saw her again. This time, there was no mistaking it. She was following them. She pretended to look at a nearby shelf, but her movements seemed too deliberate. Her presence became impossible to ignore. Was she a store employee? Security? Or was it something else entirely? They tried to brush off the feeling, moving quickly to finish their shopping. But the unease stayed. When they got to the self-checkout, they saw her standing at a distance, pretending to examine random items. She wasn't carrying a cart, a basket, or even a single item. They rushed through checkout, eager to leave. Stepping into the cool night air, they glanced over their shoulder, hoping she would stay inside. But as they reached their car, they saw her walking out of the store, empty-handed. She didn't try to hide it now. Her pace matched theirs as they moved toward their car. The unease turned into dread. They climbed into their car, locking the doors quickly. The woman stopped in the lot, standing there for a moment watching. They started the engine and drove away, thinking it was over. But as they merged onto the main road, they noticed a car behind them. At first, it seemed like a coincidence. But at every turn, the car followed. They made a random turn onto a side street, testing their theory. The car turned too. Their heart raced as they realized they were being followed. Desperate to lose her, they made more random turns, but the car stayed close. Finally, they pulled over on a quiet road, hoping to confront whoever was behind them. As the car pulled up behind theirs, they stepped out, their hands shaking. The driver's side door opened, and there she was, the same woman from the store. The moment their eyes met, she slammed her car into drive and sped off, nearly hitting them in her haste. The taillights disappeared into the distance, leaving them standing alone on the dark road. But the ordeal wasn't over. As they drove back toward a safer area, they saw her car again. It was stopped further up the road, waiting. They turned around, desperate to avoid her. This time, they called the police, explaining everything as they kept driving. When the police arrived, they pulled her over. She denied everything, claiming she hadn't been following anyone. But she had no ID and no explanation for her behavior. The police let them know they'd handle it, but the sense of safety was gone. They never found out who she was or why she followed them. But that night left a mark, a reminder that sometimes it's not your imagination. When something feels wrong, trust it. What would you do if someone followed you like this? Share your thoughts in the comments below. These 3 stories show us just how quickly an ordinary moment can turn into something unforgettable. A simple act of kindness, a regular day at work, or even a routine shopping trip can lead us into situations we never imagined. Each person in these stories trusted their instincts, and that made all the difference. What's truly chilling is how familiar these places are. A Walmart parking lot, a checkout line, a convenience store aisle, spaces we've all been in, where we expect to feel safe. But safety isn't always guaranteed. Have you ever experienced something similar? A strange encounter that stayed with you? Share your story in the comments below. We might feature it in a future video. And if these stories send a chill down your spine, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more true horror stories. Until next time, stay vigilant, because you never know what's waiting in the shadows.